Mangalam sadhu veshaya shishya chitta vilasine vidita kila vedyaya moksha vigna vigatine saumya Kashi nivasaya deshikaya viragine chaitanya nanda rupaya jivan muktaya mangalam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Now repeat after me the Shanti mantra. Om Apyayantu Mamangani Vak Pranashchakshushrotam Ato Balam Indriyani Cha Sarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam Mama Brahma Nirakarot Anirakaranamastu Anirakaranam me astu Tadatmani nirate Ya Upanishad Sudharma Te mai santu, te mai santu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Namah Shivaya. Good evening. Welcome again. I see some new people here, people who were not here yesterday, and it is okay. I will just say very short what we did yesterday for the sake of those who were not here, and also to refresh the memory of those who were here. Yesterday we discussed in very general about the Vedas, and particularly about the Upanishads. And also we started to study the Upanishad by chanting and understanding or discussing about the Shanti mantra. The Shanti mantra is the opening mantra that comes before the Upanishad, which we just chanted. Yesterday we studied it and we have seen what is the meaning, and also in particularly we discussed the qualifications of the spiritual aspirant who wants to study this, what a spiritual aspirant who wants to study it needs to acquire. Okay? And today we are going to start to study the Upanishad itself. Okay? The Kena Upanishad. I will chant the first mantra, we will chant it together. I will chant and you can repeat after me. Okay? Om Kene Shitam Patati Preshitam Manaha Kena Prana Pratama Praiti Yuktaha Kene Shitam Vachamimam Vadanti Chakshushrotam Kau Devo Yunaktihi. I will now chant once the whole thing. Kene shitam patati preshitam manaha kena prana prathama praiti yuktaha kene shitam vachamimam vadanti chakshushrotram kau devo yunakti. Sorry. The Upanishad, the Kena Upanishad, is in the form of a dialogue between a guru and a shishya, between a teacher and his disciple. And the Upanishad opens up with a question posted by the disciple to the guru. The disciple is asking the guru a question. From the question itself, we will be able to see that this is not an ordinary disciple. This is a disciple who is already advanced. He already has some knowledge and he has a lot of aspiration and inspiration, and he really wants to know the truth, and he is completely disgusted with the worldly affairs, and he wants to give it up all for the sake of spiritual seeking. He wants to find the truth, and he approaches his guru and he is posting this question. And he is asking, Kene shitam patati pre shitam manaha. He is asking, willed by whom, by the will of whom, this directed mind goes towards its object. We are going to explain it later on. We will now just translate. Kena pranaha pratamaha praiti yuktaha. Also, the prana, the vital force, by the will, by the desire of whom does the prana is able to execute its work. We will explain this also a little bit. Kene shitam vacham imam vadanti. By whose will this vacha means speech, by whose will imam, this speech, vadanti, people speak. Like when people speak, where this speech is coming from. Chakshuhu shrotram kau devo yunakti. And also he is asking about the eye, chakshuhu, the eye, and shrotram. Shrotra means the ear. So the eye and the ear. Kau devo yunakti. The eye and the ear. By whose will do they perform their functions? Okay, this is the question. Basically, the question is regarding the source of all the source of our personality. What is behind the individual? What is behind the mind, behind the prana, behind the eye, the ear, etc. He wants to know that which is the source out of which everything comes. So let us take it a little bit slower and see line by line. He is asking first about the mind. He says the mind, it must be directed by somebody or by something in order to be able to perform its functions. By itself, the mind is jada. Jada means is inert. The mind itself doesn't have intelligence. It appears to be intelligent, but actually the mind itself is not intelligent. It has some intelligence which propels it to perform its actions. And we are going to discuss it later on. We will study the commentary of Shankaracharya, and we will see how he explains it. In the same way, we have prana that is active in the body. What is a prana? Prana is being translated as the life force. What is the life force? Wherever we see movement within the universe, whatever type of movement you can think about, the movement of the wind, the movement of planet Earth, the movement of the bloodstream in the vessels, the movement of the thoughts in our mind. All type of movement is generated by one general power, which is called prana. Okay? Electricity is a form of prana. Fire, in fire we see a lot of prana. Right? Wherever we see movement, wherever we see activity, this is coming from one unified force, which is called prana. In the same way, within the individual, we see so many movements, so many activities. The movement of speech, the movement of the thoughts in the mind, the heartbeat, everything in the body is keeping moving all the time. This is by the power of prana. Now this disciple is saying, this prana must be directed by somebody, by something. It cannot be just by itself. There must be some intelligence behind it. Otherwise, it cannot function. So he is asking the guru, the teacher, what is that which is directing the prana? Kene shitam vacham imam vadanti. That speech which people speak, who is directing it? Where it is coming from? He assumes that the speech by itself has no intelligence. There must be some intelligence behind it which is governing it. What is that intelligence? Where it is coming from? Chakshu shrotram kau devo yunakti. And also the eye and the ear. The eye and the ear here represents all the five senses. Okay? It includes also the tongue and the skin and the nose, right? And we will see later on when we talk about the senses, we are not talking about the physical limb. Like when we say the tongue, which tastes, we are not talking about the physical tongue. We are talking about the faculty of taste, which is represented by the tongue. It is something which is beyond the tongue itself. And if we want to understand it, the Vedas themselves, they teach us. In your dream also, you feel taste. You don't feel it with this muscle. You know, the tongue is the only exposed muscles in our body. If you want to see muscle, everything is covered by skin. Only one muscle is exposed. This is the tongue. So this muscle, which is the tongue, this is not the sense of taste. Because in dream also we feel taste, but we don't feel it with the tongue. So that which feel taste in the dream, that is the sense of taste. Okay, of course it is connected with the mind. Yeah.
I have a question.
Please.
I don't know if it's appropriate now.
It must be appropriate.
Thank you, Swami. You were talking about the mind and the direction of the mind, who will govern the mind. What about the ill mind? Why do illnesses exist like schizophrenia? What happens? What happened that this thing happens in this world? And did Shankaracharya know this illness? Did it already exist there 800 years after Christ?
Well, for the last question you asked, if he did exist, if he knew about schizophrenia, etc., I don't know. That's the real answer, I don't know. But he knew about mental suffering for sure. And what is the reason? It is a little complex. topic, but the basic answer is the law of karma. The law of karma is what governing it. Hopefully within this course, even though it is not our topic, we will have the chance to touch this topic and then we can discuss it. Another topic that we need to discuss in order to understand it is the structure of the mind, according to Vedanta. And I believe that we will be able to get into this a little more in details, and then we can, once we understand the structure of the mind according to this system, it will be easier to understand how what happens when the mind is dysfunctional. Okay?
Can this dysfunction be healed by yoga?
If it can be healed by yoga, I believe it can be healed by yoga, but of course it is not connected to this. But I believe that yoga has a very great healing power, and there are particular fields in yoga which are dealing with healing. Not so much that philosophy that we are studying. There are other branches of yoga, other branches that are dealing more with this type of things. Yeah. Yeah.
If the mind is not able to work by himself, how can you get karma?
If the mind is not able to work by itself, how can the mind get karma? Well, the mind is the only thing that works. But by itself, there must be, you see, it is all about the question of sentiency. You know what is sentiency? The power of intelligence. Okay? Something which is sentient has intelligence. Something which is insentient has no any level of this floor is insentient. But Swami Kashi or the mosquito here, there are no mosquitoes, but suppose the mosquito is also sentient. Okay? It has some intelligence within it. So, for any type of function, there need to be some sentiency behind it. We are going to see very soon when we study Shankaracharya, we are going to see it, he will explain. There must be some sentiency behind it. The problem is that the mind is insentient, as strange as it sounds. Because to us, the mind appears to be conscious, right? My mind is conscious. But in Vedanta, we say no, the mind itself is not conscious. If you remember yesterday, I gave you the example of the mirror that reflects the light of the sun. So the question, does the mirror illumines or the sun illumines? Only the sun illumines. The mirror doesn't illumine. It doesn't create light. It only reflects the light which belongs to the sun. In the same way, Vedanta says, the mind doesn't have intelligence. It's not conscious. It's not consciousness is not a product of the mind. The mind is just a mirror that reflects consciousness. And therefore the mind appears to be conscious, just as the mirror appears to have light in it when the sun is reflected in it. Okay? Since the mind is not conscious, then there must be some consciousness behind it to propel it to action. But the action itself is connected with the mind, not with consciousness. I know, it is a little complicated, but I believe that slowly we will be able to build it up so it will become more clear and we will be able to understand it. Basically, it is a little easier to explain it with terminology taken from the philosophy of yoga, not of Vedanta. In the philosophy of yoga, they say there are two principles, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the principle of consciousness, and Prakriti is the principle of matter. Okay? They are very opposing by nature. Consciousness is one, undivided, eternal. It is intelligent, it is aware of the nature of awareness. Whereas matter is many, is limited, is changeful, and is devoid of any consciousness. They are just opposing one another. Okay? These are the two principles that encompass everything that there is. Okay? The self, consciousness, belongs to Purusha. But the mind is a product of Prakriti, of matter. Therefore, it doesn't have the capacity for intelligence, and there must be intelligence behind it for it to act. But that Purusha, that consciousness, is a Sangha, is not involved in anything. It is not creating, it is not doing anything. Every action that is being done is connected with Prakriti. Okay, it is a little subtle topic. So if you don't grasp it completely, don't worry about it. We will come back to it. But the point why we insist so much that consciousness is not doing anything, why we insist so much that consciousness is not a doer, is not creating, it's not motivating, it's just a witnessing consciousness without any action associated with it. The reason is that if it was acting, if it was doing, it was changeful. And everything which is changeful is temporary. Okay? Think about it a little bit and you will see everything which is changeful is temporary. Because what is change if not death? When the caterpillar is turning into a butterfly, the caterpillar is gone and the butterfly is born. Okay? This is just an example, but it is true for any change. You know this saying that we are dying moment by moment, or we are born moment by moment. What is the meaning? That every moment the old stuff has to go and for the new stuff to come. You say you cannot bathe in the same river twice. That river is gone, is dead, and a new river is there the next moment. So, in this sense, change implies temporality. And since we claim, and the Vedas say, that the self, consciousness, is immortal, we also have to assume it is changeless. Therefore, action is never associated with consciousness, it is always associated with the mind.
Makes no sense. Intelligence makes no sense if I don't work with it.
It is witnessing consciousness. The problem is, we will have to discuss, I know it is not yet clear. The problem is that we assume that there is consciousness and there is matter. There are two things. And now they are coming together and consciousness needs to propel matter to do. And this is how I describe it, but it is not really so. Because according to the Vedanta, we didn't get there yet, we are just beginning, but according to the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, consciousness alone is. There is no such thing as matter independent of consciousness. Matter is only an appearance within consciousness. Now, in order to explain it, and again, I was hoping to tell all this later on, when it will be a little easier to understand. But since you are asking, I have to answer. There is an analogy which is very good to just explain this. The analogy is the analogy of the movie theater. in the movie theater, there is a big screen. Okay? And on the screen there is projection of light. Due to the projection of light, we see so many things. We see a river flowing, we see the sun, we see mountains, we see movement. We see so many phenomena happening on the screen. But the screen doesn't change, doesn't do anything. Is it not? Now, when I ask you, what is there? Truly speaking, when you look, what is there? Is there only screen? Is there only river? Or is there river and screen? When you see a river flowing on the screen, what actually is there? The answer is that actually, truly, there is only screen. There is no river. River is just a play of lights on the screen. There is nothing there. There is only screen. There is only the canvas of the screen. There is nothing else. So, but the screen is changeless. So all the action which is associated, which is created on the screen, is associated with the light, which is projected on it. You see? So this is an analogy to explain that all the changes are associated with Prakriti, which we call it with Maya. Okay, in Vedanta we say there is an appearance of something that happens, but actually nothing happens. There is only Brahman. There is only pure consciousness. And within pure consciousness there is an appearance of so many things happen. So to whom belongs the action? Does it belong to the mind or does it belong to consciousness? Well, truly there is no action. That's the real answer. But before you can grasp this, you have to say no. The action is associated only with the mind. But the mind has no existence apart of consciousness. Okay? Actually, this is the topic of it is a good question. This is the topic of the Upanishad. We will see. I promise you, by the end of this, we will all be able to understand it very clearly. It will be very clear. This is the question. I will repeat it. Willed by whom does the directed mind go towards its object? Being directed by whom does the vital force that precedes all proceed towards its duty? By whom is this speech willed that people utter? Who is the effulgent being who directs the eye and the ears? This is the question posted by the disciple to the Guru. He wants to know the source of everything, where all this individuality comes from. Okay? And now, yeah, Shankaracharya here is asking a question. You see, everybody know, and we just mention it. Is it not clear that the mind decides for itself what to think? Why do we need to assume that there is somebody who directs the mind? The mind can decide. This is more or less your question. I want to think about this, I want to think about that. This is the choice of the mind, is it not? Shankaracharya says, if the mind were independent in engaging and disengaging itself, then nobody would have contemplated any evil. Shankaracharya has a very peculiar mind, and he tackles questions in a very interesting way. He says, suppose the mind was really independent to think whatever it wants, then necessarily the mind will always choose to think good thoughts. Now let me ask you, is it true? Is it the case? Is the mind always thinking good thoughts? No. Why Shankaracharya says that if the mind will be free, it will always choose to think good thoughts? Let's see what he says. And yet the mind, though conscious of the consequences, wills evil. We know that when we think bad, negative thoughts, we are going to create suffering for others and also suffering for us. How do we know? You see, how many times did you get angry? Now, when you are not angry, when you are calm, let me ask you, is anger makes you happy or miserable? Everybody knows that anger makes us miserable. Still we get angry. Why? If the mind was really free to choose, we will never get angry because it is giving us suffering. There must be something else behind the mind. Okay?
Is it the ego?
He doesn't say here. He just tells us, listen, sir, you cannot just assume that the mind is free to think, because otherwise it will think only good thoughts. And though dissuaded, it does engage in deeds of intensely sorrowful results. Not only that, the mind is propelling us to do things which are leading us to very painful situations. Hence, the question, Kene shitam patati preshitam, is appropriate. Okay? So therefore, Shankaracharya says this is a very good question. This is a question which is asked by a first-class student. And therefore, the answer of the teacher will also be in accordance. And now we will chant the second mantra. Okay, I'm sorry you don't have the transliteration of the verses, so you just listen to me and repeat after me. Okay? Shrotrasya shrotram manaso manoyat vacho havacham saupranasya pranaha pranasya pranaha chakshu chakshuhu atimuchya dhiraha pretyasmat lokat amrita bhavanti shrotrasya shrotram manaso manoyat vachoha vacham saupranasya pranaha chakshushaschakshirati muchya dhiraha pretyasma lokadamrita bhavanti. The answer that the Guru is giving the student is very, very strange. It's very strange, you will see. He says, Shrotrasya shrotram manaso manoyat vachoha vacham saupranasya pranaha. So, since he is Shrotrasya shrotram, he is the ear of the ear. Manaso manoyat, and he is also the mind of the mind. Vachoha vacham, and he is also the speech of speech. Saupranasya pranaha, and he is also the prana, the vital energy of the prana. Since this is so, chakshush, and also chakshusha, chakshuhu, and he is also the eye of the eye. Therefore, atimuchya dhiraha pretyasma lokat amrita bhavanti. Those dhiraha, those great souls, when they leave the body, knowing him, they attain immortality. I will read to you the running translation. Since he is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the speech of speech, the life of life, and the eye of the eye. Therefore, the intelligent man, after giving up self-identification with the senses and renouncing this world, become immortal. Attimuchya dhira, those intelligent people renouncing the world, and they attain immortality. Now, see what was the question and what is the answer. The question was, who is the director that leads the mind, who directs the prana, who directs, etc. And what is the answer? Because he is the ear of the ear, the eye of the eye, etc., those intelligent people renounce the world and become immortal. This is not at all an answer to the question. Yeah?
I have one question.
Please.
Man is detached from the sense organs. He renounces the world. But the last consequence, he does not accept. He don't want to get immortality.
I don't understand your question.
What is...
What is immortality?
You write, the wise attains to immortality.
Becomes immortal, yeah.
He becomes immortal. What happens if this wise man does not want to attain immortality? Does this
if he wise man, he wants to become immortal, but we have to understand what is that immortality. Immortality doesn't mean that you live forever, because otherwise we have to have lots of these guys around us. We have to be able to find them, right? So we have to understand what is the meaning of immortality. Actually, you are immortal. You just think that you are something else, and therefore you are mortal. But we will get into it. We will discuss it later. Okay? But this is the answer. And now I want to read to you part of Shankaracharya's commentary. I will just say a few words about Shankaracharya. I mentioned him also yesterday, but today also I want to say a few words. Shankaracharya is the greatest philosopher of India. He was he died very young at the age of 32. And before that, he was able to transform the face of India because of the power of his intelligence. He was able, at that time, there were two very strong currents in India in terms of philosophy and religion. And these were the Mimamsakas, the ritualists, and also the Buddhists. And Shankaracharya came and revived this tradition of Advaita Vedanta, which was always there, but with very few people. And he took it and he simply conquered India through his power of logic. And he went and he held debates with many prominent teachers of many different schools. And he was able to defeat all of them in debate, and they all accepted him as a teacher, and this is how he brought back the Advaita Vedanta. Today, in India, the Advaita Vedanta is probably the strongest school of philosophy, but it was not so at that time, and it is so today because of Shankaracharya. And he wrote a lot of commentaries and a lot of independent works. He wrote a lot of poetry. He did so much. He travels by foot around India, all circled India 4 times. And all this he finished before the age of 32. And his commentary is a masterpiece. It is not very easy to understand. You need a lot of background in order to be able to grasp it, and a lot of technicalities, etc. But if you take the trouble and you study it properly, Shankaracharya is a masterpiece. So today I will read a little bit from it, and we will try to understand whatever we're able to. Okay? He is now putting some questions and answers regarding this mantra. The way Shankaracharya and later on many others compose commentaries, it is in the form of debate also. There is the opponent putting questions, and then the presenter, or we call it Siddhanta, he is answering those questions. He is refuting those opposing views. So here also there is an objection from an opponent. He says, is it not improper to answer, he is the ear of the ear, when the reply should have been, so and so, with such and such attributes, directs the ears, etc.? He is asking just what we mentioned. This answer of the guru is not at all answering the question of the disciple. The disciple was asking who is the director of the mind, who is the director of the eye, etc. What should be the answer? The answer should be Mr. So-and-so, who has these and these qualities. He is the director of the eyes, he is the director of the mind. That should be the answer. But what instead he says? Since he is the ear of the ear, the eye of the eye, and all this is not at all an answer. Now Shankara answers. He says, this is not a fault. It's not a problem here. Why? Because his distinction cannot be ascertained otherwise. His means Brahman. The distinction of the absolute reality, that which is the ground of being, that which is the real director, that's about whom the question is asked. That which is real, the director of the mind and the prana, his distinctions cannot be ascertained otherwise. You cannot talk about him in any other way. If you want to speak about Brahman, about the ultimate truth, ultimate reality, you cannot do it in the same way that you describe objects. Okay, before I can say this, I have to explain what is that Brahman. Okay, I forgot that I didn't mention. According to the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, all this world, the inner world and the outer world, whatever is coming from something. The cause of all the causes. And that cause of all causes, which itself is causeless, is being called Brahman. What do I mean? What is the cause of this cloth? The cause of this cloth, this is like a dhoti, okay? The cause of this cloth is cotton threads, right? Cotton threads are the material cause of this. And what is the material cause of cotton threads? Cotton fibers, right? Cotton fibers make cotton threads, and cotton threads make cloth. And what is the cause of cotton fibers? Cotton molecules, right? And what is the cause of cotton molecules? The cause of cotton molecules are atoms. And what is the cause of the atoms? Subparticles, okay? And we go on and on and on, and this is true for every object in the universe. And the question is, okay, where do we stop? Where does it end? What is the cause of all causes? What is the ground of being? Where you cannot go any further, where something which is causeless. What is that? The Advaita Vedanta tells us, and today there is a bunch of scientists that accept this and promote this view, is that the ground of all being, the cause of all causes, is consciousness. Ultimately, when you go further from the subparticles all the way down the rabbit hole, you are landing at consciousness. Yeah.
Scientists are these Western scientists or Eastern?
There are, no, I'm talking about Western scientists. Yeah. I met few of them, and very interesting. No, most of them, no. Most of the scientists don't accept it. Most of the scientists say we don't know what is the last particle. Probably there is no such thing. But there is increasing group of scientists which is now changing the paradigm. And they start to say what Vedanta is saying for thousands of years, that the ground of being is consciousness and not matter. And matter is the manifestation within consciousness, rather than consciousness being an epiphenomena of matter. According to most of the scientists today, they will tell you what is consciousness is an epiphenomena of the brain. There are chemical and electric reactions within the brain. Somehow that creates consciousness. We don't know exactly how, but we know that this produces consciousness. But Vedanta says this is the other way around.
And what does...
One second, let me complete the idea. Vedanta says this is just the other way around. The ground of being, the basis, the causeless cause, that out of which everything evolves, is consciousness. And matter is just an appearance within consciousness. Like what? Like in the example I gave you of the movie theater. The screen is like consciousness. And all the lights which are projecting all the rivers and the sun and the moons and the clouds and everything, it is nothing but the screen itself. It is nothing but the screen itself. In the same way, consciousness alone is. There is only consciousness everywhere, everything. There is nothing else but consciousness. But this consciousness manifests in many different forms. Like what? Like in our dreams. In our dreams, we project a universe. Is it not? In my dream, my own mind, my own little mind, is projecting an entire world. In my dream, I see the sun, I see the moon, I see mountains, I see people, I see myself, I see so many things within my dream. They are all different from me, they are all separate, they are all independent of me, as long as I am in the dream. But what happens when I wake up? The moment I wake up, I realize, hey, the sun I have seen in my dream doesn't exist apart from me. I created this sun. My own mind projected this sun in the dream. My own mind projected the mountains and the rivers and the people. And also, the way I perceived myself in the dream is also projection of my mind. In the wakeful state, I have different experiences. And during sleep, the mind processes it. This is how the science is explaining to us, which is accepted, that the experiences we had in wakeful state are being processed and they are projected before us by the mind, and this is what we call dream. But look, while you are in the dream, you're taking everything to be so real and so solid and so independent of you. And the moment you wake up, you brush it all as a dream. You just say, no, it's not real, it's just my own mind. Vedanta tells us this is a very good analogy for consciousness and the world. Because consciousness is the ground of being, that alone is. And within consciousness, all these appearances take place. Just as the mind is one, but in the dream it appears to be so many. The mind comes in the form of the sun, comes in the form of the moon, comes in the form of the clouds. But it is just the one mind. In the same way, the one consciousness is manifesting as all this universe. Now, this is a very radical view. I know. It is very different than what we are used to think and what we are taught to believe. But if you remember yesterday, I told you everything that you can get just by reasoning, you won't find it in the Vedas. In the Vedas, you find things that you cannot just figure out like that. The Veda comes and tells us, listen, sir, you got it all wrong. It is all consciousness. Matter is just an appearance within consciousness. Okay? Yeah.
Once you wake up, I will be gone.
Once you wake up,
you wake up from the state. I will be gone.
Not you will be gone. You see, it is like somebody wakes up from the dream and he is asking, like suppose, let's put it this way. Suppose I'm having a dream, okay? And in my dream, I'm a Swami, and I come to visit in Munich, and I have a lecture, and I have such a wonderful people sitting and listening to what I say. In my dream. And then I wake up, okay? And I ask, no, let's put it this way. And in my lecture, I tell the students, listen, it is all pure consciousness. And then one of them is asking me, what happens when you wake up from this? Do I disappear? You understand? This is just the same. There is no I disappear and you disappear. There is only one pure consciousness. There is no question of disappearance or appearance. The appearance itself is ultimately an illusion. Illusion doesn't mean that it doesn't appear. It appears. But it is not really there. Ultimately. Okay? But as long as we are in the dream, we cannot ignore the happenings of the dream. This is another point. You see, as long as I am in this world, I cannot say, hey, this world is illusion, I will jump from the window, nothing will happen. No, if you jump from the window, you will crash to the floor. There is a story about Shankaracharya. He had one disciple who was a king. And one day Shankara came to the palace, and that king released a wild elephant, an elephant that gone mad. Released it, running towards Shankara. And everybody is running, hither, scattering. And Shankara sees the elephant. He just there was a coconut tree, he just climbs up the coconut tree. And that king is standing there and laughing like crazy. And after the elephant was gone, Shankaracharya is coming down and he's going to the king, and the king is still laughing. He says, look, you're teaching me that this world is illusion, but as soon as this elephant comes, you are running up the tree. Shankaracharya tells him, it is true that the elephant is an illusion, but that guy who climbed the tree is also an illusion. You see, as long as you are in this, you cannot ignore it. You cannot step out of it. You cannot just brush it aside. That's why we have all the analysis of this relative reality. In the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in philosophy, we study how the world, all these discussions about the law of karma and reincarnation, about dharma and all these, They are not dealing with ultimate reality. Why do we need to study them? No. As long as you are here, you have to live by the rules of this. As long as you are in the dream, you have to live by the rules of the dream. As long as you are awake, you have to function to the rules of the wakeful state. So that's not a problem. But in reality, ultimately, there is only one consciousness. You say, when you realize, I will disappear. This you that you are referring to, who is that you? Is that somebody who is existing and everything else doesn't exist? There is no such a you, which is an individual that is getting enlightened. This is another point that we will have to discuss, but we will leave it for later on. So these type of questions, they are good questions. I don't say, and I want you to ask. But these kind of questions are based on wrong assumptions or assumptions. They are actually, these questions take place when we mix the ultimate reality with relative reality. Relative reality is this, what we are experiencing. And ultimate reality is what we are trying to discuss here. When we mix the two, we end up with questions which appear to be paradoxical. They appear to create paradox, but they are based of the wrong assumptions. And we will deal with more such questions. Shankara himself is asking this question. It is not only we who are asking. Okay? Yeah.
It reminds me on this, like you have some dimensions more, because if you have only two, you cannot really see the room.
Yeah.
So that reminds me.
Yeah. You say that our discussion reminds you about the different dimensions that we have. Yeah. When you are dealing with two-dimensional, the world appears in a very different way. When you add the third dimension, suddenly you get depth. There is on the internet, there is, if you go to YouTube and type flatland, there is a very nice animation of this, that how the world looks from for a two-dimensional person, and how it relates to three-dimension. It is very interesting. Yeah. Yes.
My question before, the big bounce.
Big bang.
Big bang. Big
Yeah.
bang. Yeah. Sorry. Did Vedanta mention the Big Bang?
Vedanta not mentioning the Big Bang, not in this way at least. It doesn't call it. Actually, the word bang is very wrong here. There was no bang. If anybody who studies science will know, there is no any bang that are associated. It's just a bad name that somehow stuck to it. But anyway, according to Vedanta, there are cycles of creation, and in the beginning of every cycle of creation, there is a process which is quite similar in a way to the way scientists are describing what they call the Big Bang. I can explain a little bit about it. In the beginning of creation, according to the Big Bang, the first thing that comes about is space. Before what is called the Big Bang, there's what they call it singularity. Okay, scientists, they call it singularity. And they say, you ask them what happens before the Big Bang, they say there's no such thing as before the Big Bang, because time itself, time-space continuum, this is what they call it, starts in the Big Bang. You cannot talk about what happened before that. The first thing that emerges at that first moment is space, expansion of space. Okay? There is a very rapid expansion of space. And we cannot imagine what is expansion of space, because if space expands, and this is the border of space, what happens 2 centimeters out of it? There is no space there. This is because of the limitation of our mind, not because of the limitation of the theory. Anyway, we are not studying physics now. After this expansion of space, where the first thing that we have are the gases, okay, the helium and all this stuff, and they condense together, and the more they condense, they create the thermonuclear reactions that create a lot of heat, okay, and then later on it condenses further. I'm just fast forwarding history, okay? It condenses further, and that creates first liquid and then solid, okay? This corresponds to the idea in Vedanta for the 5 elements. First, we have the element of space, okay? This is the expansion. Then we have the element of air. This is the gases, gases that exist. And then we have all the thermonuclear reactions. This corresponds to fire, the element of fire. And then liquid is water, and solid is earth. These are the 5 elements. So there is some correspondence there is some similarity between the way science talk about the Big Bang and the evolution theory of Vedanta or the Vedas. Doesn't mean that it is exactly the same, and the time scale may be different. There's no, it's just an interesting point that there is similarity between the two. Okay? And let us move forward. Okay? Let us continue. I will read again the question because we are a little lost track. Shankara was asking, this answer that the guru is giving to the disciple has nothing to do with the question. How is he is answering something which is not at all connected to the question? So, then he says, this is not a fault, because his distinction cannot be ascertained otherwise. You cannot speak about Brahman, about ultimate reality, about the truth in any other way. Therefore, it is not necessary to answer Mr. So-and-so with such and such qualities. He is the director of the ears and the eyes, etc. If the director of the ears, etc., could be known as possessed of his own activity, independently of the activities of the ears, etc., just as it is in the case of the wielder of a sickle, etc., then this answer would be improper. Shankara, I will repeat it. Yeah, when I read it is difficult to translate, I know. I will try slower, but it will still be difficult because it is very Shankaracharya language. So I will always repeat after that and explain. Yeah. Shankaracharya says, if that Brahman, that absolute reality, the ultimate truth, that which is ultimately the object of the question, was an object who possesses certain qualities and attributes, just as a farmer who is holding a sickle. You know what is a sickle? Yeah. That just as a farmer who is holding a sickle, he is doing actions. If the object, if that thing about which we are asking the question was such an object, then we should have answered, Mr. So-and-so with such and such qualities is the director of the mind, of the ears, etc. But this is not the case. In other words, and this is a very vital point here in this Upanishad, Shankaracharya says, Brahman, that absolute reality, is not an object. It is not an object. What is an object? The first thing when we talk about an object, object can never come alone. Object always come with a counterpart, which is the subject. Is it not? Can there be an object without a subject? There is no meaning for object without a subject. It is a little difficult concept, but you try to think about it and you will see. If you remove completely the subject, the knower, the seer, that which knows, then the known loses its meaning. If you remove the subject, there is no object. Subject and object always go together. But Brahman, if Brahman is that absolute reality, if the absolute reality is an object, then there must be a subject who knows it. And that subject must be different than it. And not only that, we said that Brahman, that absolute truth, is of the nature of consciousness. If that is so, when it becomes an object, that which is the subject should be conscious of it. So, therefore, that Brahman which you know is not conscious anymore. You understand this point? It is a little subtle, but the point is that Brahman, that absolute reality, is not an object. We will discuss a lot about it in the coming days. You will see. And Shankara continues, but, as a matter of fact, no director of the ears, etc., possessed of his own activity, is apprehended here like a mower possessed of a sickle, etc. In reality, he says, here, Brahman is not a guy who is doing certain things. This is not who Brahman is. This is not who that ultimate reality, absolute truth is. It is not an object. It doesn't have any attributes. Therefore, you cannot answer in the same way that you are answer for questions that relate to objects. But he can be known as existing unmixed with the ear, etc., from the logical necessity that such activities as deliberation, volition, determination of those very composite things, i.e. the ears, etc., must be meant for someone's benefit. Shankara says, Brahman, that absolute reality, cannot be known as an object. It is not an object, therefore you cannot know it as you know any other object. But it doesn't mean that it cannot be known. You see? The fact that you cannot know Brahman as an object, the fact that you cannot see ultimate reality as you see any other object, doesn't mean that it cannot be known. Rather, he says, we can know it indirectly through all the activities that we see that happening around us, and we deduct that there is something behind them. Not only that, we see around us composite things. This is what Shankara is saying. Composite things. What are composite things? We see around us things that have parts. Things that have parts imply that there is some intelligence behind it. Composite things with parts imply that there is something behind it. How? He says, there must be meant for someone's benefit. How? Just as in the case of a house, so also in this case, there does exist someone standing outside of the conglomeration of ears, etc., by whose necessity is impelled the group of ears, etc. Suppose you go in the desert, you lost your way. For many ways you're going and you don't see anybody anywhere. Suddenly you see a house. Suddenly out of nowhere you see a beautiful house. That makes you very happy. Why? Because you know there must be someone, there's probably somebody around. Why? How come? Because a house doesn't happen by itself. Somebody must have willed this house. Somebody needed this house. And therefore, he went and he looked for an architect. And he employed a mason, a contractor, to build a house. And he took an interior designer. And he went to IKEA to bind everything. And he put it all together so he can go and live inside. So we see that a house implies intelligent being. Without any intelligent being, there cannot be a house manifesting itself by itself and for no purpose. Therefore, we assume that there is intelligence behind it. Shankara says, in the same way, come on, look around. The whole universe is such a composite thing. It's just a complicated thing. It must be for the sake of somebody. Not only that, look at the individual. Forget about the whole universe. You see the senses and the mind and the body, and everything functions in such a sophisticated way. Just like that, by itself, out of nothing, for the sake of nothing? No. It must be for the sake of somebody, for some purpose. Okay, there must be some intelligent being behind it. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Thus, from the fact that composite things exist for the need of someone else, a director of the ears, etc., can be known or inferred. So, because composite things imply some intelligent being, we can infer, we can understand that there is a director for the ears, there is a director for the eyes, there is a director for the mind, etc. And therefore, the question was proper, and the answer also is proper, but it cannot be answered in any other way. Okay? Now, we have about a little less than 10 minutes. We will try to cover, there is another doubt. Objection. What again can there be in the significance here for the expression, the ear of the ear, etc.? For just as a light has no need for another light, so in this context, the ear can have no need for another ear. Shankara says, okay, so you cannot say, talk directly about Brahman, I understand, but why you say he is the ear of the ear, the eye of the eye, the mind of the mind? Does the ear needs another ear in order to hear? It is just when you have a candle, the light of the candle, do you need to bring another candle in order to see it? No, it has a light of itself. In the same way, the ear has the capacity to hear. We don't need another ear in order to hear for the ear. We don't need another eye for the eye to see. Seeing is the faculty of the eye itself. Why we say he is the ear of the ear? The ear doesn't need a ear. Why do we say he is the eye of the eye? The eye doesn't need an eye. The eye itself sees.
Maybe he means the prana. It's the prana of the eye that sees.
But he is the prana of the prana, he says.
The prana of the prana, okay.
Right? He said he is the prana of the prana.
Okay.
Then why do we need another prana for the prana?
Okay.
Shankara answered, there is no such a fault. The significance here of the expression is this. The ear to it is seen to be able to reveal its own object. This ability of the ear to reveal its own object is possible only when the eternal, non-composite, all-pervading light of the self is there, but not otherwise. Shankaracharya, very shortly, that's the answer. He says, the ear appears to be able to hear by itself. It doesn't need anything. The ear along with the mind. Okay, when we talk here about the senses, it is accompanied with the mind. So the ear, with the help of the mind, is able to hear. It doesn't need any external aid. That's what usually people tend to believe. Usually we tend to think that the senses and the mind are independent. The mind, in connection with the ear, is able to hear. The mind, in connection with the eye, is able to see. We don't need any other element in order to explain it. In order to show that this is not so, that the ear doesn't have the capacity to hear, even with the help of the mind. Why? Because it is inert. It doesn't have intelligence of its own. It needs the intelligence of consciousness in order to have this function of hearing. Therefore, he is saying he is the ear of the ear. The ear of the ear doesn't mean that there is a little small ear inside of my ear which is able to hear and it is whispering to the other ear. No, this is not the idea. The ear of the ear means that there is intelligence which is behind the hearing. And if you remove that intelligence, there is no hearing. See a dead person. The ear is there, the brain is there, everything is there, but hearing is not there. Is it not? Therefore, the expression he is the ear of the ear, the eye of the eye, doesn't mean that it needs another aid. It just means that that consciousness, which is the object of the question from the first mantra, is the intelligence which is necessary for the ear and the mind and the eyes to function. Without it, without that consciousness, without Brahman, all these have no meaning, they cannot function. And there is no any other way to answer this question. Tomorrow, we are going to see that the teacher is struggling. He's telling the student, he's struggling. You will see our next verse. He says, I don't know what to tell you. It's very difficult to answer this. Because we are not talking here about an object. We are not talking about something that you can grasp, that you can hold. Therefore, I have to answer in such a funny way. Okay? So, this is the end of the second mantra. I will just read one more part of Shankara's answer. He says, it is commonly accepted belief that the ears, etc., constitute the self of all, and that these are conscious. Shankara says it is a common belief that consciousness is the faculty of the mind, as we discussed before. That the system consisting of the mind and the senses, etc., is independent and complete. By itself, it can know everything, it can function, it can do anything. This is the common belief. This is being refuted here. By saying he is the ear of the ear, he is the eye of the eye, this is the way to refute this notion, to tell us, no, the eye is not independent. The ear is not independent. The mind is not independent. The prana is not independent. It depends on consciousness, and consciousness is independent of them. Is separate and independent of them. There does exist something which is known to the intellect of the man of realization, which dwells in the innermost recesses of all, which is changeless, undecaying, immortal, fearless, and unborn, and which is the ear, etc., of even the ear, etc. That is to say, the source of their capacity to act. Thus, the answer and significance of the words can certainly be justified. Shankaracharya says, this common belief, we have to finish, this common belief that the ear and the eye and the mind are independent is completely wrong. There is the consciousness, which is the ground of all being, which is independent of everything, which is eternal, which is responsible for everything that happens, which is responsible for everything, and without it, nothing can take place. And therefore, that answer was proper. Okay, and we are going to stop now. Let's do a very short meditation and a short mantra and conclude.